Hello everybody, so today we're going to be looking at the final stage of your editing pipeline, which is the master render and final export to either YouTube or a movie clip, or a movie file should I say, which you can use to save your projects in. It's one of the most traditional or typical that you'll find for easy playback on your computers at home or on your TV. So I'm going to go through a few things first, just so that we have an understanding. So we're going to look at the master render and what that means, and how to render in general. So as you can see on the timeline here, you can see this red line that's running through from start to finish. Traditionally, you might find looking at your computer screens now that you've got a green line or an amber line, or if you're like me, as you can see here, this has quite clearly had a colour grade and colour correction done to it since the original clip here, which is quite blue, and because of that it's created a red line at the top of the timeline here. Now essentially this red line is just telling me that the computer is going to struggle with playback, so it's initially a diagnosis for if you've got choppy playback or no playback whatsoever. We really want this timeline to be green. Green should play through quite smoothly, and to some extent amber also plays through quite smoothly. Now in order to play back smoothly, as you can see when I'm scrubbing through here, the frame isn't moving at all. You simply just need to hit enter on the keyboard and that should start to render the project. Now this is going to take a little bit of time because I've managed to compile a few clips that all need rendering. As you can see here, that's an hour. Now my suggestion is that you render and go, so as soon as you see a clip turn red, hit the enter button and just wait for it to render. It will take a little bit more time up front, but it means that at the end it should be quite quick for your export, so you're going to take a little bit more time in the process. Failing that, you can do what I've done here and render at the end, but as you've just seen there, that could be an hour to wait at the end of the project when you do need to get into the export. So it's always advisable to do a master render before you hit the export section, and I'll explain why now. So imagine that this has gone green and we're going to now export our video. So to do this, you go to File, Export and Media, and that should bring up this dialog box that you see here. Let the computer catch up. Okay. So we've got our video preview here, and I can scrub through this and it should mimic the timeline that we've been working on. So as a rule of thumb, I always select H.264, but you might also have a QuickTime option. You might want to select QuickTime, but I'm going to choose H.264. It's a common codec for video output and export. For our preset, you could leave this with match source settings of a high bit rate. However, if you do want to export to YouTube, you can scroll down and choose the 1080p HD option, or if you're working in 4K, the 4K option. For today's purposes, I'm just going to choose the match source high bit rate. You can also, some people like to check this match sequence settings, but I find that gives you a codec which sometimes can be a bit temperamental. So for example here, this MPEG codec, I'm not really a fan of MPEG file format, so I'm just going to uncheck that. Do note though, if you've done a master render on here and you click the match sequence settings and then you follow the next steps, you will render a little bit quicker than the way that I'm going to show you. So once you've got your H.264 format and your preset to either match source high bitrate or the YouTube 1080 or Vimeo depending on your output source, you then need to select your output name. So I'm going to change this from rough cut to a title name, and then I'm going to select my desktop for this time just so it's an easy access, and you can see here that it's going to save it in an MP4, and I'm going to click on save. So from here we don't need to really worry about any of these options because these are sort of set within the preset. You can customize these if you want to, but I'm just going to match it all. What you're going to need to click next is Use Previews. Use Previews essentially uses the render settings that you've done earlier in your master render. So it means that rendering that you did should speed up the process while it's exporting here. Now here you can choose Use Maximum Render Quality. You won't really notice much difference in your file size, but it will take a little bit longer to render, and that just ensures that no pixels are dropped or the qualities. You're going to ensure that it's at its maximum. Typically I'm going to leave it unchecked, but you can check that if you like. It also tells you then how big the file size is going to be, so even though this is only a minute 55, the full size of this is 142 megabytes. From here, you simply click export and wait for it to do its job. And essentially, guys, that is it for this video on how to do a master render and export. Use these settings. Once you get more familiar with the codecs mentioned in the format, feel free to choose them to your desire, and just have a play around. Cheers.